Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. We're almost at the end of chapter 7. Some very difficult verses here, not in terms of their Hebrew structure or vocabulary, but in terms of their content. In the previous verses, the Lord had been announcing the destruction that's coming, and in verse 32 he said that the valley of Topheth and Ben Hinnom, where they've been sacrificing their children, is going to be called the valley of slaughter because there is so much destruction, and the people themselves will be destroyed, and their bodies will be buried there until either there's no more room left or because there's no room to bury them anywhere else. And this verse here is another sort of very gruesome verse, and it's continuing that same idea of this incredible judgment. Let's go ahead and read it in Hebrew as we get started. V'hayata nivlat ha'am hazeh le'ma'alkal la'of hashemayim ul'vehemat ha'aretz ve'ein maharid. And it will be, so what do we have here? We're going to have a perfect. It's going to be a perfect consecutive. It's going to be with this ending on it, especially with the ta right here. It's going to be a 3fs cal from our good old verb haya. And it's going to be a 3fs because the subject is going to be this word here, which we'll come to. But this is a word which means corpse, and it's feminine. So, well, let's go ahead and pick that up. And corpse, now this usually ends with an H at the end of it. It's usually navela, and usually written, if we were to write it out fully, with a schwa at the beginning, and then a seri underneath, and then a lameth with the comments. And the comments, hey, right there. So this is usually the noun for corpse. So literally the corpse of the people of this one, the corpse of this people. But corpse is often used in this construct sense here. It's often used as a collective sense. So we would have to translate this as a plural. So the corpses of this people will be, now even though a plural idea, this is a singular noun with a collective sense, and so this is a singular verb, 3fs, with a collective sense. And so the corpses of this people will be for, and will be, haya plus the verb, plus the preposition lam. It has this little nuance of become. So this will become, do you recognize the root here? Akal, meaning to eat. So they will become, me'akal is food. They will become food for birds. Now this oaf, this is a singular, but again, it's a collective noun, so it means birds, food for birds of the heavens, and this is in the construct state with hashemayim, birds of the heavens. And for behemat, you know, behema usually ends with a hey over here, which means beasts, frequently wild beasts, but not always in that sense, but in this context certainly is. And for the beast of, construct form here, literally this is a singular again, but it's a collective singular, just like oaf over here is a collective singular, like this nivla over here is a collective singular as well. So for the beast, collective singular of the land. And there is not, again with this nuance, because we're dealing with the future here, and we may want to give a slight future nuance to this, and there is not, or there will not be. Now what is this here? And this looks a little bit strange, but you have a ma at the beginning, you have a heric yod in the middle of it. You might think, if you know your paradigms, you might think this is a participle. You'd be exactly right, and this is a masculine singular participle. And the ma at the beginning with the heric yod would tell you this is probably a hifil, and the other three consonants you have left are harad. There we go, harad. Now that's just a regular, here we go, just a regular daleth at the end. No, it's not a calf or anything. Harad, which means to be terrified in the cow, but in the hifil would have the sense of to cause to be terrified, to drive someone away in terror. And so the participle would be more used here as a substantive, so there's no one to drive them away. In other words, the animals and the birds that are coming to feast upon the flesh of the bodies, and there's no one to drive them away. There's no one to chase them away. So they will have free rein to devour the leftover flesh in this destruction. So it's a very gruesome picture of what's happening here. because sin is a gruesome thing, and this is the outworking of it coming upon the people as Jeremiah concludes his sermon. One more verse to look at. Well, let's hide our work here. Look at a couple of translations. First of all, in the Christian Standard Bible, the corpses of these people, taking people, corpses in a collective sense, and people actually in a collective sense as well. This is this people, but these people will become food for the birds of the sky and for the wild animals of the land, with no one to scare them away, to cause them to be terrified. No one terrifying them. And then in the NIV, very similar sort of idea. Then the carcasses of this people will become food for the birds and the wild animals, and there will be no one to frighten them away. And all of our translations are all along these main lines. This is meant to be a very repulsive and, as I said again, gruesome picture of what's going to happen, because the consequences of sin are very gruesome. In one form or another, it's something that destroys God's people. It destroys any good that God had intended to bring. There's one more verse we want to look at as we'll bring this to a conclusion in chapter 7. It's been a hard chapter, but a very important chapter. So check back with us soon as we finish up chapter 7 in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.